Okay, so we are in week 8 of our reading plan, and this brings us to the fourth major discourse of Jesus, his big talk, which is all about what the kingdom is like, painting the picture of the upside down kingdom of Jesus. And I lied to you in the email because I said that there was a section that ended. We'll talk about this. Our whole section for this week really gets started with this story right here. Who is the greatest? And the way that we know that there's a thread from this story all the way through is this line right here, where Jesus says, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So just pay attention to how many times children get dropped in front of you as you read this week and as we talk tonight. But we pick it up here at the parable of the unforgiving servant. So again, we're in the fourth discourse, all about this upside down kingdom and what's coming next. Jesus is on his way toward Jerusalem and on his way toward this clash of kingdoms that we're going to read about in the weeks to come. So let's set up this story here. It's a story many of you have probably encountered before, a story about forgiveness. Peter, God bless him, he just keeps trying and doing and like coming out with these liners that he thinks are going to be amazing, and sometimes they are. And today, I think he has such a good motivation. He comes to Jesus and he says, "Lord, you're talking about this whole kingdom deal. We're talking about what happens when our, brothers and sisters sin against us. What are we to do? And I should love them, just, bring them back into the fold. How many times are we supposed to do that?" You have to wonder if he has some of his fellow disciples in mind who have irked him to no end. And he's wondering, how long, Jesus, am I going to have to put up with this guy before I just get to write them off? And he says, um, is it as many as 7 times per se? Now, again, Peter probably thinks he's being really good here because in rabbinic tradition, how many times could you forgive someone before it was permissible for you to like, okay, you've done enough? How many times?
Seven.
Seven.
Three.
Oh, three.
Three. Oh, three. Wow.
Only 3 times. The
That's great
rabbis
to
taught
know.
and do you remember the chart of numbers that I gave you a couple weeks? Was
Yeah.
it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Does anyone remember what 3 represented?
The Trinity.
Yeah.
That's for
Completeness.
us.
Community.
Community is right, Carl. So, what that would be saying in rabbinic tradition is you forgive someone enough times that it's like perfect. This is what perfect community looks like, forgiving 3 times. But what does Peter say? I'll forgive them 7 times. It's perfect, right? The number, you have to think he's like, I got it right, Jesus, didn't I? Like he wants the gold star for rabbinical training. And what does Jesus say? Yeah, you got it, dude. No problem. 7 times. Matthew messes with you 7 times, and that's all you got to forgive. No, Jesus says, no, 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 no. Not 7 times, 77 times. And this is a teaching I've heard in multiple places. So many of you know Jesus is not saying, okay, you keep a ledger, you count up like tick marks on a prison wall, how many days you've been there, where you just have to keep a record of wrongs. In fact, we are going to read later in the New Testament, you don't keep a record of wrongs. So clearly, Jesus is saying something else here. What do you think he might be pointing to? Where there's another story in the Bible that has 77. And look, one rule of thumb that Marty has helped me with this time around studying Matthew is if you come to a story and there's an odd detail like 77 that just seems out of place, what you should immediately do is go to BibleGateway.com and type in 77 and just see what else pops up. If there's a weird detail in the story, search it. Search it in the Bible to see if there's another passage in the Old Testament that somehow uses that same idea. And if you were to do that with 77, there's one story, one that would pop up. which is a pretty good sign that Jesus is doing something really intentional. And do you know where that would be?
Noah?
It's in the story of Genesis 4, the
Is it?
Well,
story
Cain
of
and Abel.
Cain and Abel. And for some reason, my highlight went away. So we're going to, here we go. Okay. So in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain kills his brother. God pushes him out further away from Eden. And then we end up with this story of his descendant, great, 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 great descendants. His name is Lamech. He's a descendant of Cain. And he basically has kids too, but he sings this really ridiculous song to his two wives. This is what he has to say to them. I'm not going to say their names. Hear my voice, my two wives. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Do you hear what
Mm.
he's saying here? I killed a man just for merely wounding me. He kind of sounds like his great, 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 great ancestor, right? Who killed a man just because he was wounded. But this is a young man. It's almost as if it's that much worse. He killed a young man for just striking him. His vengeance, the kind of person that he is going to seek vengeance 77-fold. And what Jesus is doing with this story, by the way, the very next story is Noah, Bill, like you were saying. And one of the features of this story is that the wickedness of humankind had spiraled ever since Cain and the garden in Genesis 3, it's spiraling out of control. Lamech is one of the examples of how humanity is spiraling out of control. Sin is growing and growing and growing to the point where the flood comes and God starts all over again. So, why would Jesus be referencing that story? Well, what he's saying is no, 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 no. This isn't about how many times you have to forgive someone. What Jesus is saying is I'm trying to create a kind of kingdom that will reverse the downward spiral of humanity. And what that's going to take from you is becoming the opposite of Lamech. You're not keeping a record of wrongs. You're forgiving to the point where the community is restored and the world is being set right again. Where would that end? It wouldn't. You're forgiving until there's nothing left to be forgiven for. Do you see what I'm saying here? You're
Isn't
forgiving
Jesus,
until the world is being put right again.
Mhm.
Bill, what
isn't
were you going to
Jesus,
say?
well, isn't Jesus really saying forgive them without them even having to ask?
Yeah. He's saying you just gotta do it. You've got to become the kind of person who is a forgiving person. There's no limit to your forgiveness. You've got to forgive to the point where you are outdoing the evil of the world. And really of that, there's no limit. Does this make sense? Just
Mhm.
this is how the Bible works. One little hyperlink that takes you back and gives you a universe of understanding that makes this story come alive. And so, what Jesus is then going to do is tell a story that illustrates his point. We want to be the kind of people in the kingdom of heaven who forgive and restore everything, redemption to the world. What does that look like? Okay, well, here's what it looks like, Jesus says. It's like a king who wants to settle the debts that are owed to him. And so the king calls one of these servants who owes him a debt. And by the way, the debt that this servant owes is 10,000 talents. Think of this as 10,000 bags of gold. Um, Marty estimates that this would be the earnings equivalent of is it lifetimes? Yeah,
Yeah.
three lifetimes worth of a day laborer's just work. Okay. Is this a debt that a day laborer, a servant could ever pay off? 3
Yeah.
lifetimes. We're not talking about an economy where you can like just get a better paying job and start chipping away at your debt. We're talking about a day laborer who owes 3 times what they could even hope to pay back here. The picture is of a debt so large it's laughable, like impossible to ever pay off. And since he can't pay, it's not just him that's going to pay the price. His master, the king, orders his whole family to be sold in order to pay back the debt that is owed. And so this servant who owes this impossible debt gets down on his knees and begs the king, have patience with me. I'll pay everything back. Now, on the one hand, you have to think, what is he thinking here? It's not possible for him to pay everything back. But he asks the king for patience. And what kind of king is this? It's the kind of king who will forgive. So the king has compassion upon him. He releases him and forgives the debt. He wipes the slate clean. Now, I don't know. I imagine there's some of us here who understand what it's like to carry debt. I had probably close to $100,000 in student loan debt at one time. And the weight that just sits on you for a debt like that is indescribable. And that's just that little amount compared to what this guy owes. And I want you to picture carrying that around all the time and knowing that your family is going to have to pay the price for that debt. We don't know why this person's in debt. It's not said that they necessarily did anything wrong. It's just that they've owed this debt. And so, what must it have felt like for him for that debt to be wiped clean? Just imagine the debt, whatever debt you have, you wake up one day and it's gone. How would you respond? What do you do in the face of that kind of generosity? And all of us know what this feels like, at least at some level, because this is the best picture of Jesus and what he has done for us that you can have. There is a debt that Jesus did nothing to earn or deserve, did nothing to incur, that we owed him. And through his death, the debt has been cleared, forgiven. The weight is off your shoulders. What do you do with that kind of generosity in the face of that kind of mercy and compassion? Well, what does this servant do? He leaves and he goes debt collecting. He finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii. Now, 100 denarii would be 3 months' wages. 3 months. He owed 3 lifetimes worth of debt. This person owes him 3 months worth of debt. Do you see the picture here is lopsided scales? And yet, even though he's just been forgiven what he could never have repaid, he seizes the man, chokes him, pay what you owe. You can, like, he roughs him up a lot. And the fellow servant uses the exact same words with him that the original servant used with the king. Have patience with me. I will pay you back. Does he listen? Does he remember the words that were spoken over him and the debt that's been repaid to him? It's not like he's trying to shake this guy down for a debt to repay the king. The slate was wiped clean. So what does he need this money for? Make sense? So he refuses. He puts the servant in prison until he will pay him back the debt. Now the king hears about this through the other servants who sees what's happened. Someone have a question? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. The other servants complain to the king. The king calls this man to him. He says, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you pleaded with me. But the other servant came to you and pleaded with you. Shouldn't you have had mercy on him just as I had mercy on you?" And in his anger, the master, his king, delivered him to the jailers. And catch this, because this was new for me, until he should pay all of his debt. Who's the he? How do you read this? First off, how do you read it? Whose debt needs to be repaid back?
Ours.
The first one.
So
The
first
original
servant.
servant, right?
Yeah,
Does he have a debt anymore?
supposedly not.
No.
No. I think Marty makes the case that this he is actually the second servant, that he should pay, aka cancel, release. That's what this word means, to cancel the debt. It could be that what's being said here is until the original servant cancels all the debt of the other servant.
Right.
Wow.
So he's
Okay.
not being put in jail until he can pay back that impossible debt. That debt's been canceled. He is being put in jail until he can find it in himself to have the same kind of mercy and compassion that he was shown. In other words, as Marty puts it, he's got the keys to his own prison. Now, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So also Jesus says, my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. This is not about paying back the debt. This is about forgiving the debt that others owe us. And I guarantee you that all of us can sit here and close our eyes and think of debts that we feel like we're owed, things that we feel like people have done to wrong us, and the justice that we're owed in return. And forgiveness doesn't mean that any of that was right or didn't happen or wasn't fair. Forgiveness means you cancel the debt. You leave it in Jesus's hands to make right, and you forgive, you release any sense of what you are owed. That's what forgiveness means. And Jesus wants us to see that if we're not willing to do that, even though we have been forgiven much, it's like we're putting ourselves in prison, putting ourselves behind bars. So don't do that. He says, forgive. Become the kind of people who forgive and forgive and forgive. Why? Because you have to recognize how much you have been forgiven as well. And if we want to be the kind of people who make heaven return to earth or bring more of heaven to earth, then we have to be the kind of people who stop this cycle of debt and prison and all of these things, and be people who release people from their bondage and chains. Does this make sense?
Mhm.
Questions,
Just,
thoughts,
yeah,
comments?
yeah,
It's a big
a
story.
question. Where does this then cross over to enablement? Where a child does something like
Yep.
break the window, you forgive them, but they go, "Oh well, that wasn't any big deal. Next time I won't. I might not even tell you."
Yeah, what Jesus is not saying here is that there aren't consequences, right?
Oh,
He's
okay.
it's not about that. This is not like every picture of forgiveness. This is about canceling the debt that you're owed. This is not about not holding people responsible for their actions. Make
Okay,
sense?
that's a big
Because
deal.
think
Yeah.
about it. Jesus is going to, when he arrives in Jerusalem, is he going to kind of hold the Pharisees responsible for their actions? You betcha. You betcha. I think part of at least what I'm thinking in this moment that I hadn't noticed before, what do you think is one of the differences here? Are we talking necessarily about people who do wrong and don't know they've done wrong? No. What do
No.
both of these stories have in common?
They know they're in debt.
Have patience with me. There's repentance here on both of the debt
Mhm.
carriers. Does that make sense? They're
Yeah.
asking for an apology. Now, I don't think that this is Jesus saying only forgive those people who are asking for an apology, but there's something to that too. I don't think this is Jesus saying forgive people when they trample all over you to the
Right.
point where you allow them to continue to do that. Make sense?
Yes.
Because even clearly, we're talking about someone being held responsible for their misdeeds when they don't forgive. But yeah, that's a great question.
Mhm.
I thought it was really eye-opening that the first servant was forgiven for 3 lifetimes.
Hmm.
His servant only owed him for 3 months.
Yeah. And just put that in perspective of how much God has forgiven us for.
Absolutely.
And yet,
Absolutely.
what are the teeny tiny little debts that we carry and just hold on to for a lifetime? And Jesus wants us to see that when we do that, we're keeping ourselves in bondage just as much as we're keeping the other person in bondage.
And doesn't
Okay.
that go back to the fruits of the Spirit as well? That if you've been forgiven, then
Yeah,
that love should overflow to others.
absolutely.
But
Okay,
I
we're
agree
gonna
with the
move.
I just very briefly though, I agree with the gentleman, I think was it Stan, who said, when does it cross over to enablement? Because I
Yeah.
think I've asked that question before, that I'm very good at letting go of things, but cheering on your enemies is always something I've struggled with. So yeah, thanks.
Well, and again, Jesus doesn't say cheer on your, he says love them, pray for them. Love is not like a tolerant thing of, oh, what they're doing is wonderful and I bless it. Love means sacrifice. Sacrifice for your enemies. That's a different thing. It's a different thing. Okay, we're going to move on to something a little less controversial, and that's divorce. What
Ah,
you need to know is in Jesus's day, um, who carried out all the divorces?
man.
Yep, women weren't really able to divorce. This was a man thing. So whatever Jesus is talking about here, he's going after the guys. And I'm so sorry. It just is what it is. There are lessons that we can take from it too, but he's targeting men in this story. There were two rabbinic schools of thought, two rabbinic traditions that are going to come up all over the place in the next couple of weeks. Um, there are two famous rabbis, Shammai and Hillel. So just remember these names, Shammai and Hillel. You'll hear them again multiple times as we talk about these different parables that Jesus is after, because most of the time that the Pharisees come up and ask him a question, they're wanting to know which school of thought Jesus is in on. It's not unlike someone coming up to a pastor today and be like, are you Republican or Democrat? Which school of thought do you belong to? Thinking that if you know the answer to that question, you know everything they think about everything. Make sense? So Shammai interpreted the law of divorce, which we find in Deuteronomy 4:1. There was this huge debate about this verse right here. And really, it's these two words right here, some indecency. Now, I'm not going to spend forever going into detail about this. I'm just going to give you the Cliff Notes version. The word order here in the Hebrew makes a ton of difference as to what this is saying. It translates in Hebrew to either a naked thing, which you can imagine what that means, a naked thing, or like a thing of nakedness. The Shammai took the first view, a naked thing. And so what he would say is this verse means that divorce is only allowed in the case of adultery or sexual misconduct. But Hillel, who was more on the love side of things, Shammai was more of obedience to the law, was his kind of big deal. He would translate all of the Torah about obedience. Hillel would look at it through the lens of love. And for some reason, there's a lot of debate about why he takes it this way, but the rabbi who was more concerned with love translates this the second way, a thing of nakedness, or it was a naked thing, a thing of nakedness. And in his mind, what that translated into is that you could divorce your wife for practically anything. So look at the question that the Pharisees asked Jesus. Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? What are they trying to figure out? Are you Hillel or Shammai? Now, when I say any cause, I want you to think of the last thing and don't say it out loud because some of your spouses are here. What was the last thing that your spouse did to just upset you? Burn your dinner, break a plate, not wear the right clothes. Maybe they just showed up without makeup and you reminded of what they look like with whatever it is for you. Maybe you saw someone else that you thought was more attractive. Maybe they talked back to you. Maybe you're mad because they just stunk today. I don't know. Like you insert the blank here. Hillel would say,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, if your wife displeased you, divorce him. Divorce him. Now, he would say you need to go to the divorce court on the other side of town. Really think about it before you do it. But hey, if they burn your food, you go write the certificate of divorce. So these are the two schools of thought. Only adultery, anything you want. Which view do you think was more prevalent in Jesus's day?
The anything.
Anything. Now, what would be the result for the women in this picture? If their
They had
husbands were
nothing.
allowed to divorce them for just anything, what happens to them?
Nothing. Then they have nowhere to go and they have no means of support, no shelter, nothing.
They're not likely to get remarried, right? Not
No,
all of them,
because
at least. It would be harder. They have no one to protect them, no way of earning money for themselves unless they're going to go
poverty.
into some, sordid path. So, who ended up being hurt by this the most?
The women. The women.
Women. So, when Jesus says, look, this is what marriage was supposed to be. You're not two people, you're one now. Don't separate. What do you think his ultimate goal is here?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness, sure. This is primarily about him protecting women. No, dudes, you can't just do whatever you want and throw your wife away. You made a commitment to protect them, to provide for them, to care for them. You cannot just separate under any circumstances. Now, he does say, yes, Moses made conditions on this because of your hardness of heart. He gave you a way out because you guys were just so stubborn. But this is not the way it was supposed to be. Whatever he is saying here is so intense that the disciples respond with, yikes. If this is true, it would be better not to get married. If we can't just divorce our wives and lay them down whenever we want, it would be better not to get married. And you know what Jesus' response to that is? Maybe, yeah, if that's how you feel about it. Because it's better for women to have someone who will stand by them and protect them than it is for you to enter into this kind of covenant if you think you can just throw it aside. And I said this in the email, the more I read about divorce and the more I read the Old Testament, the more I'm convinced that the undercurrent of all of these passages is another kind of covenant. I mean, marriage is a covenant between two people. It's a covenant partnership. Well,
Our covenant with God.
Israel has entered into a covenant partnership with God. And in the Old Testament, when Israel rebels or when they worship other gods, it's always referred to as idolatry. We learned this in Revelation. To the fact where it said that God has divorced them. And the question is, will God, go back to them and remarry them, or will he just divorce them for good? And so I have to wonder if Jesus is telling his disciples, you know what? Yeah, it's better for you not to marry. In fact, if you're going to follow me, you're going to need to figure this out, because in the kingdom of God, we keep our covenant promises. And by the way, not just the covenant promises to your wives, but the covenant promises you made to me and to God. We take them seriously here. And so he says, yeah, let the one who's able to receive it, receive it. If you can handle this, come and follow me. But if you can't, then you may need to not get married. That's how serious this is. Does this make sense?
Mhm.
I said a lot more in the email, including a link to an article if you want to read more about specifics on where the church stands. We've talked about this a number of times with other reading plans, so I'm just going to keep going so we can get to these other stories. How are we feeling?
I'm
Okay.
glad you brought up Alex. I'm glad you brought up Shammai and Hillel, and then you equated it to Republican and Democrat, because actually in the podcast, Marty talks about, doesn't he, how he sides with Shammai, but he does it for Hillel's reason.
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Which is really cool when you start to think about that. So let that sink in, because I think this started to catch for me when we read Hebrews. I think it was
Mhm.
Hebrews, where we were talking about should they be circumcised or not, and that's also related, I think, to the
Totally.
debate. So
It is
yeah, and
more a part of Jesus's teachings than we even understand. And most of the time, he's going to side with Hillel, but he doesn't here. He sides with Shammai, but throws a little Hillel into it, just like you said.
yes.
He
So think
doesn't
about
fit
that.
neat categories.
Yes. In our world today, we need to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, on to another fun little passage about nothing controversial again, riches. Um, Here we have again, by the way, it's almost like Jesus is saying, remember, I told you to be like children. Don't do anything that would keep the children from coming to me. Don't hinder them. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I think this is a link back. If I had to guess, this could be the center of a chiasm between Matthew 18 and what we're going to see at the end of this passage at the end of 20. I haven't laid it out. It's part of my work before I preach next week, but just think about this. Let the little children come. Those who are willing to follow, come on over. If you want to be great, then you're going to have to be someone who keeps their covenant promises. And you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit. Now, I read this story and about the rich young man, and this question here really, I think, holds the key to what's going on in this story. So look at what the man asks him. Teacher, Rabbi, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? Now, some of you are like me and like this young man, and what you crave in life more than anything else is a really detailed checklist of what needs to be done. You love a to-do list. You like scratching things off a to-do list. Again, if you're like me, you'll put things you just did onto the to-do list just so you can cross them off for the boost, okay?
Yeah.
I kind of think this guy is like that. He wants to know, Jesus, give me the checklist. I'm willing to do it. What do I need to do? Give me the ABC, order of things. And I think Jesus goes, okay, I'll play your game. You want a checklist? I got your checklist right here. Okay, how about the commandments? Keep those. Well, which ones? The guy wants to know. And Jesus just starts ticking them off. We'll start with the famous ones. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, and don't bear false witness. Honor your mother and father and love your neighbor as yourself. Can you do that checklist? And the young man says to them, yeah, I've got that. Check, 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 check. What else? Is that it? And Jesus says to him, okay, you want to know you want to know the other two checkpoints? If you want to be perfect, read complete or whole. If you want to be made whole, sell what you possess and give it to the poor. Then you'll have treasure in heaven. And then come follow me. He gives him two more checkpoints. Get rid of everything you own, give it all away, and then once you have nothing left, come with me. Come follow me.
Ooh.
Now, we don't know which one of these that this young man balks at. All we know is that he walks away sad. And I have to think, if we go back to the start of chapter 18, when Jesus says, if you want to be great, be like a child. Does a child really, like toddler child, do they own anything?
Nothing.
No, they have nothing to their name. They are wholly dependent upon their parents. I think Jesus is saying, those who want to follow me, you've got to be wholly dependent upon me. You can't come at this thing grasping too tightly to anything you own. You have to be willing to let go of all of it. And the question that haunts me about this story is, what wouldn't I give up to follow Jesus? Lots of us like to think that we would drop everything at the drop of a hat and follow Jesus, but be real with yourself. What wouldn't you do? Where wouldn't you go? What wouldn't you give up if Jesus came calling and asked you to? We don't know what it is for this man, but what we hear time and time again is Jesus say, take up your cross. Come and follow me. Take up your cross. And I wonder how many times we treat Jesus or following Jesus as if it is a means toward an end instead of the end in of itself. He says, come and follow me. And if you want to do that perfectly, then you got to come at it holding nothing and be willing to give up everything. Jesus says to his disciples after this man walks away, we have no idea what happened. And I think Matthew does that on purpose because I think Matthew does all these follow stories sometimes. And he's talking about this young ruler, but he's also going, what about you, dear reader? Are you willing to follow? Are you walking away sad? What will you do next? What decision will you make? Jesus says to his disciples, truly I say to you, only with difficult will a rich person enter the kingdom of heaven. And what he's not saying here is people can't have money and follow him. We know there are plenty of rich, wealthy women who fund his ministry and follow him. What he's saying is you cannot come to him expecting to cling to everything that you have as like a secondary blanket. What wouldn't you give up? Peter, God love him. Here we are again. By the way, they say that the disciples again, who can be saved if this is the case? Because what they viewed is people with money it was a sign that you were blessed by God. So if even the most wealthy people who are blessed by God are going to have trouble following him, then what hope is there for the rest of us? And Jesus says, yeah, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And then Peter, we've left everything and followed you. We've done this pretty well, right, Jesus? We're pretty broke. We're hanging around you. What are we going to have? And Jesus says to them, truly I say to you, in the new world, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Yeah, I've got a special plan for you. Don't worry, Peter. Everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or fathers or mother or children or lands for my name's sake will receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. This right here is the theme of this section. If you want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, if you want to be considered on the same vein as Jesus, well, then you have to make yourself last. You have to be willing to give up everything. But if you're spending time chasing after riches or power or status or anything else, then you've already got your reward. And that kind of thing will not fly in the kingdom of heaven. And again, as if to just drive this point home, Jesus is going to tell another story. He's going to tell a story about a vineyard owner. Now, in the Old Testament, the vineyard is an incredibly rich theme. I mean, you could spend hours just searching up images of vineyards and grapes and wine and whether Israel is producing good fruit or bad fruit. I mean, this is a theme we went after a lot in Revelation. The wine press of God's wrath and all these different images associated with the vineyard. But what you have to remember for this story is this is God's vineyard, and he's coming to have laborers to bring out the good fruit. And he's hiring all these workers from the very first hour of the day that are going to work 12 hours all the way through to where they're only going to have 1 hour left. And I just want you to put yourself in the position of the first laborers that are called. And when it's pay time, you see people who have only worked for an hour or 3 hours who are getting the exact same payment as you. Now, do you begrudge what the disciples are upset about here? Do you sense that, like, when the laborers are talking about how unfair this would be, you kind of feel it, don't you? I think Jesus wants us to. And what he wants us to wrestle with, that Elizabeth said so well in the email, is actually the kingdom of God is not fair. If you're expecting a kingdom that is all about what you earn and what you deserve, then you have another thing coming for you. because in God's economy, fairness is not the right word. Generosity is. Remember, you've been forgiven much, so you forgive much. You haven't earned a thing. God has been given you all the things. And so I just think he wants to level set with his disciples and say, this is not the kind of kingdom where fairness is going to come into play. This is a generous kingdom. The last will be first, and the first will be last. So don't begrudge God for his generosity. Make sense? We're going to fly over that one. Questions, thoughts,
Yeah.
comments?
Well, I mean, it makes sense, but when, of course, when you read it and think about it, you get the point, but by the same token, in life, right?
Yep,
It is massively unfair, right?
totally.
Because now, granted, his point's accurate. You agreed to work for this, right?
Yeah.
You had an agreement. Well, I'm not taking anything away from you. And that's, to me, is the key point is it's costing them nothing for what he's doing to the other
Yeah.
for the others. But it's easy in life to get lost in that, like,
Totally.
well, you know,
And I think it comes back to the question that they were debating. Who is the greatest, right? Who's going to be number one? And if you're going to pay those people who only worked an hour that wage, well, then certainly you're going to pay us more. We're going to get more dividends the more important we are, the more we do for God. I mean, isn't that what the rich young ruler wanted? What do I need to do to earn it? And what Jesus is laying down is the reality that actually you don't earn a thing. It's a gift that's given to you. And the same gift that you receive is the gift that they receive. I mean, think about it. If they struggle with this, they're really going to struggle with the idea of the thieves on the cross who didn't do anything to deserve their salvation, right? And what we ought to be are people who celebrate God's generosity and that unfairness because, whoa, if this kingdom were based on fairness, we would be in trouble. Okay, this is pretty important to the story that comes next. Jesus, once again, a third time, is telling his disciples what's about to happen to him in Jerusalem. He says it pretty plainly. I'm going to die. He says, I'm going to be handed over to the Romans, the Gentiles, to be mocked, flogged, crucified, and then I'll be raised on the third day. And after this, after the third time Jesus has told his disciples this, we get this story. And I love this because I didn't realize it until recently that actually this is the compliment ending to chapter 18. Who is the greatest? Now we have a mother coming to ask that same question on her son's behalf. So these two stories are bookends. They are absolutely related, and everything that happens in between is teaching us what greatness looks like in the kingdom. So we're not told, and I have a lot of fun thinking about how this must have gone down. We don't know if the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, goad their mother into asking this question, like, Mom, the last time we asked Jesus who is the greatest, he got kind of mad at us and then went on a tangent. So, what if you asked him? Could you do that for us? Let us know what he says. Or it's either that, or the mom takes it upon herself my sons are the best ones here because, every mother is really unbiased about that. And she goes to Jesus. But what we do see is that the brothers go with her. So either they are just embarrassed out of their minds and trying to stop her and can't, or they're like secretly going, go, Mom, go, ask him the question. But look at how this story goes down. So she comes to Jesus, and before she even asks anything, he says to her, what do you want? And again, I just think this is worth you spending time at some point this week wrestling with honestly, what do you want from Jesus? If you had a chance to ask him a question, what would you ask him? What would you ask him for? What are you hoping that he'll do for you? Are you hoping that he will make your life easier? That he'll give you a checklist of what you need to do to earn God's favor? Are you hoping that he will make your life easier in some way or take away pain that you have? What do you want Jesus to do for you? What she wants Jesus to do is give her sons positions of status and authority in the kingdom. Now, put this in context here. Jesus has just said that he is about to die. So either they don't believe that, they refuse to acknowledge it, and they just want positions of power in Jesus' kingdom. He's going to Jerusalem. He's going to take up his throne. He's going to rule as king. We want to be your lieutenants, number one and number two. That's like best case scenario. Worst case scenario, I think, is Jesus has said he's going to die. They believe him, and they want to know who's next in line to carry on the movement. Who's going to inherit this kingdom? If Jesus is the king and he's going to die, well then who gets to be in charge next? Either way, it's not a good look for these two guys. And so Jesus answers her. And really, I think he looks at them and goes, okay, guys, I'm just going to address you here. You don't know what you're asking for. You have no idea. You've heard the adage, be careful what you pray for? I laugh because every time I preach on a topic, it's like I struggle with that topic all week long. It just hits me in the face all week long. And it's already started with this passage about who's the greatest. Jesus says, you have no idea what you're asking for. You should be careful what you ask me, what you want. Can you actually drink the cup that I'm about to drink? You sure you want to sit with me and go through what I'm about to go through? This image of drinking the cup, I'm going to put two resources in the chat for you. One, for those who just want to listen to a quick podcast, and by quick, I think it's like an hour long, or those of you who want to really go deep. These are study notes from the Bible Project. You can look at God's anger and the problem of, just so much here to dig into. But what you'll find, the gist of it, I'm going to give you, for those of you who don't like either reading or listening to podcasts, drinking the cup was an Old Testament image of God pouring out his wrath. And this doesn't look like what you think it looks like when I say those words, God pouring out his wrath. What it doesn't mean is that God got really angry and he poured out his wrath by just smashing people and doing bad things to them. More often than not, what God's wrath looks like is him saying, you know what? You don't want me to be your king. You don't want to do things my way. Totally fine. I'm going to pull back. So God pulls back his influence, his protection, and allows people to face the consequences of their own actions. If you are a parent, you totally get this image because it's like your kid has done something dumb for the 15th time in a row and you said, stop running. You're going to hurt yourself. Please stop running. You're going to hurt yourself. You know what? We don't run in this house because you're going to break something or you're going to get hurt. And finally you say, you know what? Okay, you're not going to listen to me? Then let's see what happens. And sure enough, what happens? Your kid gets hurt because they fell. They weren't listening to you. You know what I'm talking about here? This is what it means for God to pour out his wrath. It means handing people over to face the consequences of their own selfish, rebellious behavior. That's what it means to drink from the cup. Now, we know that Jesus hasn't rebelled. He hasn't done anything. There's no consequences that he needs to face. So what cup is he drinking? The cup that he's drinking is the cup of everyone else. Jesus is going to drink the cup and take upon himself all the consequences of human sin and rebellion through all the generations. Jesus says, is that really what you want, James and John? You want to drink that cup with me? You want to be part of that? You want to take on the consequences of all human sin and rebellion? And what do they say to him? Yeah, we'll do it. Now, I don't know that they particularly know or understand what they're asking for. In fact, that's what Jesus says. You don't understand, but they're down for it. That whatever you want, Jesus will do it. Absolutely. And what he says to them, I find so haunting. Yeah, you will. You'll drink this cup. James and John are both going to die martyrs' deaths.
Mhm.
They'll drink the cup. They don't know what they're asking for, but they're going to find out. But Jesus says, to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to grant. It is for those it has been prepared for by my Father. And I have to wonder if James and John go back to this moment on the crucifixion, and they see the moment Jesus is enthroned as king, the moment he drinks from the cup and takes the sin of the world into himself, faces all the consequences of the broken covenant. If they see who's on the right and the left and finally understand. To sit on the right and left of Jesus is for God to grant. It's for these two criminals who will share in this moment of Jesus' greatest glory and greatest humiliation all at the same time. Again, do you really want to sit on my right and left? What does it mean to be elevated to positions of status and honor and power in the kingdom of God? What does it look like? This is what it looks like. It means to take up your cross. If you want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, take up your cross. Be prepared to go wherever it takes. What wouldn't you give? Where wouldn't you go to follow Jesus? Whoever would be great among you must be your servant. You must be willing to give up it all, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is what Jesus came to do, to drink from this cup. And he invites his followers to follow him, not in a life that elevates themselves, but in a life that lays down their lives in order to do something even greater. And putting the final stamp on this, Jesus is around Jericho, which there's something here that I probably links to the Jericho story in the Old Testament. I don't know what it is, but if I had time, this would be a fun rabbit trail to go down. And there's two blind men sitting by the roadside. And Jesus has just spent all this time trying to open the eyes of his disciples. And the blind men cry out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. They see Jesus for who he truly is, even though they're blind. The disciples can see, but they can't really see. Jesus again asks them, what do you want me to do for you? Now, at some level, the answer to that is pretty obvious. I mean, they want something pretty practical. They want their sight. And they say to him, Lord, let our eyes be opened. And I have to think that Matthew is writing this with a little bit of a twinkle in his eye. What do you want from Jesus? What you really need from him is your eyes to be opened. We need to learn to see the world differently and to recover our sight, to be able to see things not through our own worldly way of looking at things through the lens of status and riches and power and glory, but to see the world through Jesus' lens. And so that is my prayer for all of us tonight, that our eyes would be opened, that we would begin to see the world through the eyes of Jesus instead of the world's eyes that call us to value the wrong things, that we would see the areas in our lives where we need to pick up our cross and follow him. That Jesus would give us an idea of what he's calling us to leave behind so that we can come into something entirely new. And to see the eyes of people who are in desperate need of his love, that we have the power of bringing that mercy and compassion. So that's where we end. And again, we pick up next week with the triumphal entry. 5 weeks we will get to spend in the last week of Jesus's life. And I hope that as we enter into this, that you will keep this entire section in mind, starting with chapter 18 all the way through chapter 20. What does it mean to be great in the kingdom of heaven? What does it look like? What does it look like for you? I'm going to stop here and just give you time to reflect, ask questions. What's sticking out about this to you? What's not clear?
Alex,
Yeah, Mary?
I was just thinking that Jesus was saying, if you want to be perfect, you have to do all these things. And I was thinking, it is impossible for us to be perfect or holy. I mean, it's where um, we try to be perfect, but we fall short. And it's where it's even when we sell all that we have, we still are going to fall short.
Yeah.
And it's where it's where there's no way that humans could be perfect. It's only Jesus that can be perfect, and so that's it's impossible for us um, for us to be. Uh, so one can get into perfectionist mode, but it's still hard to be.
Yeah, Mary, I think you're exactly right. And I think that's what Jesus is kind of pointing him at. It's almost like he's saying, all right, let's do a word exercise. Where have you not? Oh, follow me. You willing to come follow me? And he's not necessarily saying you've got to do all these things. Actually, what he's saying is you need to enter into this way of life. It's not necessarily about what you do, it's about who you're following, who you're allowing to shape your life. Jesus says, I want it to be me. What won't you do in order for me to be the one to shape your life? So I think he's getting to exactly what you're saying. He's just kind of doing it in a very Jesus rabbi-like way, where he's playing the game, but he's going to come to a different ending than the guy expects. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Anything else? Okay, spend some time this week. What is it that you really want from Jesus? And then what do you think he really wants from you? Okay, I see all of you jumping off here before I ask you to pray. I see you. Um, who would be willing to close us out in prayer tonight?
May I do it since this is the last time I can attend live because I've got to
Yes.
teach again next week. Thank you
Okay,
guys for
Lou.
indulging me. Thanks, Alex. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this wonderful group, particularly now that I can seldom attend. I realize the value of it just to have time to, read your word communally and to really soak it in and to, get away from the hubbub of the world and think about you. Dear Lord, please help us all to spend the week ahead, recalling what Alex has said about Jesus being the end in itself, asking ourselves what we want from you, and, remember that Jesus should be the center of our lives. Dear Lord, be with each and every one of us. Thank you again for Alex and her ministry. In closing, dear Lord, as a little Australian who reads the news, please, dear Lord, be with all Americans as they've gone to war since last I attended this group. Be with those who are in the military, but be with all American citizens. And dear Lord, please bring your peace and love to everybody. And dear Lord, finally, on a personal note, I've always loved the work of Savannah Guthrie, who was born in Australia. And dear Lord, it breaks my heart to hear what their family's going through with their mother's abduction, especially since I know what wonderful Christian people they were. If there's any way that that can be resolved, dear Lord, please do, because it's so heartbreaking to hear about. Dear Lord, please be with everybody on this call and be with everyone. Amen.
Amen.
Mhm.
All right, we'll see you
Thank you.
next
Amen.
week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you,
Have
Alex.
a good
Bye.
one.